All right, let's dive right into this explainer, breaking down the newly released jail footage and the incredibly complex ongoing investigation of the Ciders family case over in Vinton County, Ohio. Now, this is a story that has absolutely gripped the community ever since deputies executed a search warrant and found 16 children living in just deeply troubling conditions. So today, we're going to get a close look at the visual evidence of the suspects being booked. We'll examine the massive evidentiary undertaking that's happening right now, and we'll break down the major legal hurdles that prosecutors are up against. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll take a look inside the booking footage. Second, we'll explore uncovering the hidden evidence. And finally, we're going to map out the legal road ahead. Starting right off with Section 1, Inside the Booking Footage, analyzing suspect demeanors and booking protocols. When you look at the booking process, there's this really stark physical contrast between the two men. You have 73-year-old Gary Sr., who appears incredibly thin and frail, just dressed in his pajama bottoms. Now, we actually learned he fell on the way to the jail, something the staff didn't know initially, but he's seen needing a wheelchair and sporting this mysterious white bandage on his shoulder. He actually had to be released to a hospital later for a serious medical condition. But then, in sharp contrast, you have his son, Gary Jr. He appears quite well fed, walking totally independently. While he was being processed, he actually looked back and waved at someone. His intake documented a ton of tattoos. We're talking names, hearts, an outlaw symbol with a peace sign, and a cross with a sword. And honestly, the contrast between the women is just as intense. You have Christina, who goes by Lynn, standing tall. She's got this confident posture, answering the officer's questions directly. But then you look at Elizabeth, who has absolutely no criminal record, and she presents a completely different picture. This is her very first time in jail, and her body language? She is practically cowering. She just stands by watching early in the process, looking visibly terrified. Her hair is wet, maybe suggesting she had just taken a shower, and you can clearly see this unexplained bruise on her left arm during both the intake and arraignment videos. The footage also gives us a fascinating, clear look at standard intake protocols. For example, both of the men were shackled at the ankles, while the women weren't, though almost everyone had their handcuffs secured to heavy belly chains. The video meticulously documents the whole process: contraband checks, pat-downs, and eventually handing out the standard orange jail jumpsuits. During intake, they were also questioned about their substance use history. In fact, Gary Jr.'s form noted that he either uses drugs or alcohol, or was actively under the influence of one at the time. Okay, moving on to Section 2, uncovering the hidden evidence, focusing on the victims and the digital footprint.
16. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. 16. That is the staggering number of children found living in squalor in a house on Omar Street back on June 30th. These kids range in age from an 18-year-old all the way down to 1.5-year-old twins. And they were discovered almost by accident when deputies and state agents were executing a search warrant for a totally separate investigation. Thankfully, today, all 16 are in therapeutic foster care.
Former prosecutor and current judge Rob Junk brings up a really crucial hurdle for investigators here. Because the older 6 children haven't attended school since at least October of 2021, that extreme isolation creates some major challenges. Under Ohio law, keeping kids out of school like this is called parental educational neglect. So the resulting lack of exposure to the outside world really leaves investigators questioning the children's basic ability to communicate. How are they going to relay what actually happened to them behind those closed doors? So right now, the investigation is operating on a few very complex fronts. First, you have the medical and behavioral side, which is absolutely critical. When the kids were found, they were all evaluated at hospitals. Some stayed for days, and one child actually had to be intubated. Now, full medical and psychological workups are essential to document any long-term abuse. Simultaneously, we have the digital forensics front. The BCI Cybercrimes Unit is actively pulling data from seized iPhones and iPads, tracking locations, app usage, all of those digital footprints. And finally, witness interviews. It's really notable here that Elizabeth Ciders' defense attorney stated she is cooperating fully with the investigation. That could be a massive pivot point as this case moves forward. Now, here's where things get really eerie. While these kids were deeply isolated from the physical world and kept out of school, they actually had access to phones and social media. But these accounts, they were completely void of personal photos. Instead, they were just filled with Japanese anime and sad, reposted TikTok videos that honestly looked like cries for help. As former prosecutor Rob Junk pointed out, this might be a situation where the parents just handed the kids screens to keep them occupied, quiet, and out of the way for hours on end, so they wouldn't actually have to parent them. Let's shift gears to Section 3, the legal road ahead and navigating this justice system. The path to justice here is a slow burn. It started with that initial raid on June 30th, followed by the hospitalizations and arrests. Right now, we're in the middle phase, the grueling, behind-the-scenes work of deep medical evaluations and the BCI cyber unit analyzing all those seized devices. The upcoming critical milestone is the grand jury presentation. The defendants actually waived their right to a preliminary hearing, which means the prosecution is now laser-focused entirely on securing a formal grand jury indictment based on everything they're finding right now. But there's a major legal hurdle dictating the pace of this whole thing, and that's the speedy trial clock. Under Ohio law, a suspect's right to a speedy trial means the state usually has exactly 270 days to bring a case to court after an arrest. It is a strict countdown, and that clock starts ticking the very moment the handcuffs click into place. But here's the catch. That 270-day window shrinks dramatically when defendants are incarcerated. Because Gary Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina are sitting in jail on a $300,000 bond each, every single day they spend behind bars counts as 3 days under the law. Do the math, and that gives prosecutors a highly pressured, strict 90-day deadline to bring this case to trial. And that pressure cooker is exactly where legal strategy steps in. Due to the sheer volume of digital evidence pouring in from the BCI Cybercrimes Unit, legal experts anticipate the defendants will execute something called a time waiver. In these massive complex investigations with huge data dumps, a time waiver lets the defendant say, hey, we don't care how long it takes, pause the clock. It basically gives their defense attorneys the breathing room they need to carefully review every single piece of evidence before a trial even begins. As if the ticking clock wasn't enough, the legal complications are literally piling up. First, you've got contested court orders. There's a gag order in Gary Jr.'s case being challenged all the way up to the Ohio Supreme Court, while Christina's attorney is pushing for a non-dissemination order to lock down information. Second, the Vinton County grand jury only convenes about once every month and a half, creating a huge logistical bottleneck for indictments. Third, we have to talk about the highly disturbing context of teen marriages in this family. Elizabeth married Gary Jr. when she was just 15 years old, which could legally constitute statutory rape, a very serious felony in Ohio. And finally, there are 4 separate public indecency charges against Gary Jr. from late May, which is likely what gave deputies the initial reason to secure that search warrant that uncovered the 16 kids in the first place. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we have to look ahead and ask, what dark truths are still waiting to be uncovered by the cyber unit in those digital device dumps? With months of grueling work ahead of them, will the data pulled from those iPads and iPhones provide the definitive evidence needed to get justice for the 16 children isolated in that home? The legal wheels are turning slowly, but the information coming to light could change absolutely everything. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. Keep asking questions, and we'll see exactly how this complex legal process unfolds.